Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome. Welcome to our live roundtable, The Evolution of Endpoint Security, EDR, and XDR. I'm Brian Reed, and I'll be your host today, along with Tom and Ed. As is usual custom, we wait for about a minute to give everybody a chance to come in and join us so they can join the live conversation. Today's conversation will be an interactive one across the three of us, and we have the Q&A open. So please, as we go, feel free to click the Q&A button and put in your question. We'll be monitoring for those and ask those as we go or at the end of the session here. So as part of today's session, we'll be recording the content. That content will be made available to you and sent to you via email in another day or two after the event. We'll also share some follow-up information as well on the topic of mobile EDR and mobile XDR, which we'll be covering today as well. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started today. I'm Brian Reed. I recently joined Appdome. I've got 20 years in mobile dating back to the BlackBerry, and I'm excited to be part of Appdome and be your host today during our live discussion. With me, we have Ed Amoroso. Ed, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Brian. So I'm Ed Amoroso. I've basically devoted my life to cybersecurity as a practitioner for quite some time. I was a CISO over at AT&T and more recently, professor at NYU, and I run an advisory company called TAG that gives guidance to CISO-led teams and also helps vendors. But I'm looking forward to this because Tom's one of my gurus in mobile app security. So whenever I need something, I call over to Tom. So I'm really excited to have a nice discussion today.
Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom. I'm one of the co-creators and developers of the Appdome platform. So I am a mobile developer, machine learning, AI, security research as well. So offensive and defensive research. And Ed was actually one of my customers at a prior company. So we go back a ways. So he certainly knows how to challenge me. So I look forward to that.
Right? I don't think any of my clothes don't have vendor t-shirt and have vendor names on the shirt, but nice to connect.
All right.
So obviously today is going to be a good interactive session. So remember, we will take Stump the Speaker questions. So the Q&A tab is open. Feel free to click and ask a question. I'll be moderating those questions as we go. But for today's conversation, we have a few organized questions that we wanted to get started with. So, Ed, you've got a long history as a practitioner, as a leader, as an executive, as a teacher, instructor at NYU, and the work you do in your advisory. EDR is obviously a core topic in every organization, right? No enterprise would operate without an EDR solution today. What do you see is the current discussions? What's the current state of endpoint and EDR in the market? And kind of give us a macro view of what that world looks like today.
It's so funny when you ask a CISO to describe their company or their security setup, they always start with EDR, don't they? It's like, and then they get to SOC. It's like so top of mind for most teams. That's fine. It's an important control. But eventually get around to saying, how are you dealing with mobile? And there's usually a pause where they know darn well that that's something they should be focused on more. And that's one of the reasons I've been chatting with Tom, like, man, how do we fix sort of that gap? And thinking, so I think, Brian, the word gap definitely comes to mind in the context of this, I think appropriate attention to EDR and endpoint. Not saying that's wrong. It just feels like there might be some more attention that needs to be placed in the area of both devices, apps, infrastructure, and we're going to talk about mobile app in a minute, but that's been my observation, that I think that there's a recognition that we haven't completed the puzzle here. And I spend a lot of time coaching teams to spend a little bit more, expend a little more effort in this area.
Yeah, so Tom, obviously you've been in mobile for a long time now and co-founded a company and created a product related to it. EDR is a core capability for all of the enterprises out there, as Ed said. But we're finding that to go with an enterprise EDR, there are still some gaps in mobile. So what have you experienced out there as you've worked with organizations?
Yeah, I mean, our entry into the EDR market was really kind of as a response to the demand from customers. I can't say that we had any great vision in it. It was just our customers who were using our product more to protect consumer apps, and in other ways, maybe using our product to UEM or MAM enable, MDM enable their applications. But between sort of mobility management and, consumer protection or brand protection, business protection, there was this kind of huge area in the middle for, kind of how do we protect the endpoint? How do we protect the enterprise from on-device malware, on-device threats that might connect maybe through our VPN, maybe in our authentication flows into our corporate network and do some harm. And so our customers, as Ed points out, who were investing in EDR and looking for solutions that allowed them to automate response and have a faster incident response, have a faster resolution time to exploits, started to look at the mobile side and said, "Hey, Appdome, can you guys do something here?" We're looking at the big guys like CrowdStrike, et cetera, and they don't have a mobile component, and we want to know kind of if you can do that. Now, it's very interesting. When we first started to hear this, we really didn't know what EDR meant, at least from the standpoint of what the minimum set of requirements were from the customers. But they've laid it out, and I think it's a very interesting one. I mean, number one, is they want that malware inspection of the device. They want to know if the device that the user is using to perform work is compromised or not. And the number two thing is they want to understand if there's anything on the wire between the app and its resource, that could be interfering with or spying on or whatnot. And then the third thing, which is very interesting to me, is they want the types of controls that you would normally see in a consumer world. So things like identity theft, so overlays, key logging, spyware, things of that nature that might compromise identity access management or some other access control. So they want those kinds of things as well. So there's this kind of huge thing in the middle between kind of MDM-ish, UEM-ish, remote wipe, remote, configure, allow, not allow, etc. And kind of the brand protection. There's this huge middle area where there just seemed to be so much demand. And so we're catching up with it. Honestly, we're not, I wouldn't say we're at the forefront of it. We're kind of being pulled into it by our customers. So we're on the journey of learning all that's there. So
yeah, and so when we look at the marketplace here, I'm looking at a question that came through. BYOD versus corporate owned are different kinds of scenarios, right? So a traditional laptop that's running Endpoint on it is typically owned and operated by the business and is locked down by the business, depending on the industry you're in. Mobile creates this interesting scenario where maybe only 20 or 30% of devices in the enterprise might be company owned, and the other 70 or 80%, or maybe even every user has a BYO device. And that creates an interesting set of challenges, right, for kind of the organization to deal with. So, Tom, how maybe you can help explain a little bit about the difference between mobile and the BYOD scenario versus the traditional endpoint, and then I'll steer to you, Ed, after that.
yeah, well, Ed and I mean, both of us, we all have faced the what do we call it, consumerization of IT. Like we've all faced the notion that we're all sort of bound by whatever the prevailing trends are. And the reality is you're having more and more device types out there, whether they're people want to work on tablets, they want to work on iPads with keyboards as opposed to laptops, or they want to, virtual reality headsets, wearables, all kinds of new devices, automobiles with, those big giant monitors that I always laugh at in some electric cars, like Tesla. I was like, so what am I supposed to do here? My email while I'm in a Tesla or something? But, you're definitely getting, more and more devices out there, and that's going to pull the workforce forward into more and more kind of platforms to do this. I think if you sort of think about this problem as sort of as taffy being pulled and holes being created as you pull this out, we've already gone from a world where even the distinction between company owned company managed, or for that matter, company managed and BYOD is being pulled apart. Like BYOD used to mean, you purchase it and enroll it and we manage it. Now it's BYOD actually means we don't manage it. Like BYOD is a true BYOD, like unenrolled, unmanaged, not inside your Intune environment, not inside your BlackBerry environment, not managed by your Workspace ONE or anything like that, but literally BYOD. And so if you've got a company authenticator app or a corporate VPN app, or you've got corporate CRM or expense tracking, whatever, critical assets on your mobile device, and you're using that to access kind of the back end, the network, it becomes a really, really, really interesting place for an attacker to sit and watch and wait and do things. And we've seen that, in some of the exploits and SolarWinds and others, you can really, really, once this taffy and these holes that are created are really an interesting place if you're an attacker to kind of spend your time. So I think as the device landscape continues to proliferate, as work from home continues to go out, the taffy is just going to get pulled more in directions, and you're going to create more of these holes that have to be filled with something. And identity access management is not enough. Mobile device management is not enough. You're going to have to kind of insert something into that, and I think mobile EDR is the answer to it. So, Ed, what do you think? I mean, I don't know. You know more about this than I do, so I only know the mobile side. The whole picture. So, what do you think? I'm off base? You think it's
No, it's right on the money. Every company talks about, deperimeterization and zero trust, meaning that the endpoint takes on a very significant role. Hence, EDR and companies like CrowdStrike and others getting so big and powerful. I think for people listening, if you're in somewhat agreement that BYOD does make some sense. Like, I mean, we see it in mobile, but I'm surprised. I'm always surprised that we don't see it more with, more traditional, say, PCs and laptops. If you're thinking, how do I deal with this? The mobile case is a heck of a nice way to learn, because we do have a situation that might, in some sense, be a bit ahead of where we are with PCs and laptops. I mean, I know in my own company, young people show up with their MacBook and want to use it, and there's a spectacular temptation. In fact, many times it's too great to avoid to let people do it. Hey, I don't buy you a car to drive to work, probably don't buy your mobile. Do I really need to be buying you a PC if there are acceptable zero trust solutions that allow me to have you connect securely to apps? Learning how to do that in the mobile context is probably a heck of a good way to be prepared should that zero trust driven BYOD approach emerge. And again, I know there's a lot of people say, no, we don't do BYOD. Neither did I, for years. But it does, the things happen gradually until they happen quickly. So you never
Yeah.
can tell. So I love the idea. I mean, I guess there's a million other reasons to protect your mobile apps, but in the context, Brian, of your point around BYOD, I would just say it's natural in mobile. It feels less natural, for traditional endpoint, but I don't know that that's going to always be the case. So
Yeah.
something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I definitely think you're going to see it in tablets. I mean, we have
Don't you think?
we have folks in our company, and it's always a cool thing. Someone in our company will show up and say, we didn't buy them the iPad with the
Right.
keyboard, so they get the new iPad with the keyboard, and they show up to a meeting with it, and and everyone's like, oh,
Right.
wow, like
I'll
that's
tell you one group that really loves that concept, CFOs, right?
yeah, yeah. Well,
They're a go team on this. Now, again,
yeah,
people like myself, yeah, I've always liked to control the endpoint, but that maybe over the next few years, maybe that is not as necessary, in the way we used to do it. We can protect the endpoint more virtually and make it a more flexible zero trust approach.
yeah,
So again, people listening, don't always cling to the older stuff. You don't have to do that. There are new ways to do things. And literally that almost complete dissolution of the perimeter. We've all seen that. We're all using cloud all day long. It does beg that you be creative. So keep an open mind if you're listening right now. This is something
Yeah.
mobile can teach you something.
Well, I think there's actually a silver lining here as well. And Brian, you probably remember this. I mean, in the old days of MDM, I mean, there was this whole theory that, well, we were going to go give these SDKs to these B2B app makers, and the B2B app makers were going to join our community and our ecosystem and so forth, and they were going to MDM enable their apps and bring them into the enterprise, and that was going to be this big nirvana, and it did not happen. The B2B app makers were like, no, I'm not doing this, way too much work. I'm out of here. And so very, very few people were able, to attract or maintain, the work days and the sales forces and the big names, to this notion. The silver lining here is I think that you've got B2B app makers now who are like, okay, my enterprise now is requiring me or asking me to deliver enhanced functionality, cyber functionality, security features into my apps. Okay, I think I ought to start taking a look at this. I think I ought to start working on this. So I think, whether it's the users who are coming forward and saying, hey, I want to use this cool new platform at work and I bought it and I want to do it, or it's the B2B app makers coming in and saying, okay, I'm more willing to entertain this. And it's the IT team and the CISO team who's coming forward and going, I've got this gap and I need to solve it. I think there's a perfect storm happening there where it's possible. It really is a realistic possibility to deliver EDR capability in a mobile context. Whereas before, there was too many roadblocks in the way. Even, by the way, even the app stores these days are allowing internal applications to be posted, to the app stores for download and use by users. When 5 years ago, the app store said, no, 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 you can only have consumer facing apps, not internally facing apps. So even that barrier is lowering. So I think there's just this confluence and convergence happening really around this notion that yes, people need all kinds of platforms, all kinds of ways of doing work. And yes, we need to secure that work, and we need to do it in the most agile, lightweight way that we can so that we don't constrict productivity and get in the way of people doing their jobs and stuff. So I'm very excited about kind of, literally when customers started asking us about it, like you, Ed, I was kind of like, my brain was in the old world. So I was like, I don't know, maybe this is going to be too hard. There's going to be too many roadblocks. Uh, but the more I dug into it, I was like, oh, okay, wait a minute. It's changed. The world's changed and people overnight are more open to this. Oh, okay. Well, I guess we should enter the market then, and I guess we should do this. And that's kind of how it got going. So I had to go like, wait a minute, I shouldn't be clung to this old world. I had to be like, oh, okay, this can happen now. We've evolved. Like, wow, like how amazing. So I don't know, Brian, if any of that rings true to
Yeah, I
you.
think well, it does. For those of you who've known me for years, I was a good technology and we had an SDK and that whole journey that Tom talked about. And there were some challenges in that. And I think what's interesting about listening to the two of you talk about this is in the land of endpoint, we've always thought that was a piece of hardware. And I think now endpoint is the application layer. The applications themselves are the endpoint, right? So now I may have zero trust on the device, but it's actually the applications I need to determine if I trust the app and the user, right? And so, some of the technologies, Tom, that you're talking about now are really focusing on that app layer. And so the EDR becomes like embedded in the app, as it were, that the business uses, whether they build it themselves or pull it out of the app store. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the application layer, and then we'll go to Ed on that view of app is the endpoint versus the device.
Yeah, I mean, look, I believe applications are the center, and there's one very big trend right now that's going to put applications 100% center stage, and that is the Gen AI explosion. I mean, we're all going to have smart agents on our phones, doing things for us, and those agents are applications. And if you're not adding inspection capability, EDR capability inside or as part of agents to make sure that the prompt query response mechanism isn't being infiltrated and so forth, you're not thinking about this right. Everyone's going through about, prompt poisoning and LLM hijacking and all of that. So imagine now you have a smart agent, for work sitting on your mobile device, and your employees are using it to get, information out. Okay. And malware is inserting itself into that, or monitoring all of the queries and responses that are being, entered. If you're not doing that device inspection to see, is there malware interfering with this, or, I just think the gravitational pull towards the application as the perimeter is going to be even more in this kind of AI revolution. I mean, someone was telling me, one of our colleagues was telling me about Microsoft Teams Premium, which has an AI summary, summary mechanism in it. And I was like, he's like, should we upgrade? And I was like, yes, we should. Obviously there's going to be risks, obviously there's going to be whatever, but people want those productivity gains out of technology, and I think it's just going to pull us all in that direction. So, I don't know, Ed, if your thoughts are similar to that, or you have a different view, but I'd love to hear them.
Not a different view. I mean, it's fun listening to both you and Brian drive or make the case based on tech. But one thing that makes me nuts here is that the compliance and regulatory communities like almost completely ignored this area. Like when I talk to them, and I have to be careful because the CISOs get mad when I say, "Hey, compliance teams, where are you?" But the truth is that it helps you when there are compliance requirements that are explicit about a particular control. Life gets good as a CISO because it moves from a, gee, I'd like to have this, to a, hey, boss, we don't have a choice, and it just, I remember like earlier versions of NIST, CSF, even more recent ones. If you look at the ratio of things that sort of reference mobility to the larger scope of the document, it's almost embarrassing how little that community has sort of focused on an area that, Tom, you and I always joke, this is the most important thing in your whole life, your phone. I mean, I had the experience at AT&T watching, sort of the progression from more traditional flip phones to smartphones to the present. I watched the whole thing, and we would watch when people would bring their mobile device like to a store when it was broken. In the old days, they'd whip the flip phone on thing and say, this thing is broken. And then later they would come and cup it like they're holding a kid and say, my life is broken. Can you restore my life? It's like, are you kidding me? So, and anybody watching knows, especially for kids, that effect. So you wonder if you work in compliance or audit, or if you're a regulator, man, this is important stuff. And do us all a favor. And how about jacking this up a little bit? Because like I said, on the surface, you would think a CISO would go, oh my God, no, please don't regulate. But when we're at the bar having a beer afterwards, we're going, boy, I wish I did have some of that, because then it just becomes easier to get money. So I don't know if you've seen that. It seems like that community's been a little bit too.
Well, I think it's a lot easier to draw a line in the sand, to your point. I think it's a lot easier to draw a line in the sand. The technology exists to allow you to deliver, right? So if I'm a compliance person, I can say, hey, thou must have this, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts. And you have a technology that can allow you to do that. I mean, the whole promise of whether it's EDR, XDR, or what have you, is to combine, detection and response all under one single pane of glass, and be able to kind of see it, solve it all in one go. And so if it's easier for you as a business, or you as a dev team, or you as an administrator, or what have you, to get those defenses into production, then compliance wise, why aren't I taking a hard line? Because, hey man, it's not like you have to go take out a hammer and a chisel and, chip away at a piece of stone here, right? You're not making a pyramid. Like, and so I do think, and I was at a CISO conference last week or a week ago, whatever, and I was saying this to the same kind of message, which is technologies exist now where you can have a recipe for every single application in your estate. You can, Gartner used to call it policy as code. Like you literally have technologies now, Appdome being one, of course, but you have technologies now, CrowdStrike being another, whatever, Palo Alto being another, whatever, pick your vendor, where you can implement, a policy and that be delivered in the environment that you intended to be delivered in. Now, if you don't have that, if you're not able to affect policy as code, then yeah, your compliance team is going to have a hard time. Your compliance team is going to be like, okay, we can. It's sort of like, putting a P in front of a locomotive. The business is not going to stop. The business is going to keep moving. The business is going to keep rolling. But if instead of a P, right, you put, you add, as we all say, shift left and, whatever, we add security in the dev lifecycle, or we put tools in place like XDR and EDR that allow, automated detection and response. Like I was talking to one customer down in the south, and they were like, "Oh, so Tom, do you have XTD? What is no? Yeah, XTD or XDR? Which one's better?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Do you want to stare at pretty pictures? Or you want to do stuff? Because I mean, at the end of the day, doing stuff is so much better than just staring at pretty pictures. You've got to be able to. You're a CISO, you're a cyber team, your job's operational now. It's not advisory, and so if it's operational, you got to be able to affect outcomes, and that's really where it comes down to. So I agree with you. I think compliance teams have more power now. Compliance teams can step forward now on mobile across, not just on mobile, across the gamut and say, hey, we've got technologies now that allow us to do this stuff. So, you know,
I mean,
here,
that's the key. We didn't have much in the early days, and that's why it started out kind of slow. The idea had been, well, we shove AV on a PC, so let's just shove AV on a mobile. Didn't work out too well, and everybody went, kind of whatever. And I think that's not the situation that we have anymore, obviously.
yeah. Well, AV, and for that matter, agent-based EDR platforms in mobile sort of face the same problem, which is the user can turn them off.
Yeah.
The user can turn them off. I mean, people today ask me this question. They're like, Tom, what's the difference? You have an agentless EDR, which means essentially we put the EDR functionality into an application that a user uses every day versus having the user download a different application, install it, turn it on, use it, etc. So those models, those older models where you have to download an app, turn it on, etc., are the same as an antivirus solution. We have to download and use it. The user can turn it off. The user can uninstall it. And the minute they can turn it off and uninstall it, your whole EDR strategy is gone. So it's got to be persistent. It's got to be lightweight. It's got to be in the flow. And I think you're right. If we can do this, and their technologies, again, Appdome being one, technologies out there that allow this, if you can do that, then you can actually affect this outcome. Like you said, it's like we can do this. It's like right there. Like you can do it now. Don't be stuck in the old ways. Like it's possible to do this. And I think I'm really excited about this part of the world.
So it seems like, as we wind up here, it seems like convergence is arriving, right? So you have the kind of the big three traditional EDRs that have a strong endpoint and network-centric view of the world. You have the mobile innovators, sort of like Appdome. Ed, what do you see? Is there an opportunity for convergence here to kind of bring all this together and more?
Yeah, it's a complicated thing. The tech convergence, clearly. I mean, you guys have been good at that. The problem is, and Tom knows this, the budgets are still not converged. There's still teams that do mobile over here and apps over there and endpoint over here. And it's like, so at some point, we probably do need to do some work around that because, and again, Tom, you're more of an expert than I am, but it's EDR, for example, is a budgeted item. Now does this go into that budget? Does it go into mobile? Does it go in app? I think that convergence, Brian and Tom, has not happened yet. But I think that the tech part, no question about it. I mean, we've been talking now for half an hour. I think it is a message of convergence, but the buyers have to, they have to hold up their end of the bargain as well.
Yeah, I'd say I think you're right. I think the Well, certainly I'd say a couple of things. Say mobile has kind of caught everybody, brand businesses kind of by surprise. I mean, COVID forward, I don't think the modern CISO organization was sort of ready for the mobile explosion. It just sort of happened. And
Or did they have budget set aside?
yeah. And I don't mean ready like human wise. I mean ready organizationally
Yeah,
and budgets and in structures and so forth. And the way of addressing mobile was kind of, as you said, kind of organizationally put, one person over here in mobility, and maybe have somebody on the AppSec team that does a little bit of it, or what do you, red team looks at it every once in a while, or what have you. So organizationally, I don't mean like individually, because individually we all adopted mobile like overnight. We're all like, oh hey, everybody thinks mobile, and we're wearing watches now to determine if we're having a heart attack. Like everyone's like just shifted and jumped, and that's we're buying our kids virtual reality headsets and things like that. So as humans, we move very quickly. Organizationally, I agree with Ed. We haven't gotten to that point yet. Though I will say again, there's a silver lining. I see, you know, a convergence within organizations and a recognition within different groups that, okay, I've got a piece of this, you've got a piece of this. Maybe we ought to be getting together to solve this together, because our workforce and ourselves are all on mobile. Like, I will regularly go into a customer environment and ask a very simple question, both on the brand side, i.e. the revenue channel side, and on the enterprise side, the workforce side. What percentage of your workforce do you believe is mobile today? And they'll give me a number, whatever the number is. And would you say that you have more applications, mobile applications, that you've a mobile app enabled your employees more or less today versus 3 years ago? Obviously, they'll still say more, right? For sure. Do you think that trend's gonna go down, up, whatever? Oh, it's definitely gonna go up. Okay, great. So if we know these things, if we know these basic things, let me ask you a question. What are you doing? And you believe in endpoint detection and response? Yes. And you believe in XDR, extended detection and response, correct? Data response, see it, solve it, alerts, quick incident response, automated response. You believe it? Yeah. Okay. What are you using to solve the mobile challenge? And I think you get into this, and it's this light bulb that goes off where organizations realize, you know, the same way, by the way, on the brand side, you go and say, how much of your transactions are going through mobile? And they're like, oh, 80%. I'm like, wow, 80% of your transactions are going through mobile. How much are you spending budget-wise on that? And they'll be like, uh, it's like, yeah, like it's organizationally, Ed is absolutely right. Organizations are now kind of starting to shift and look at this. Even compliance things like geo compliance, kind of questions. We've got some very interesting things going on with our new geo compliance offering inside organizations that want to make sure that their employees are, say, working from home, whatever, saying where they are, whatever, that they're not in places they shouldn't be, and all those kinds of things. It's amazing kind of evolution that's going on out there. And I think you are going to see organizations adapt. I don't know if we're going to have like a mobile czar or a mobile CISO. Something. I don't think that's going to happen, but I definitely think it's all going to converge together. And the technologies, people are already asking us, can the data from our EDR solution be pumped into other EDR solutions? Technologically, that's going to happen. Organizationally, I think Ed's right. We've got to continue to work with companies to kind of get them to collaborate on those outcomes in order to get there. So,
all right, Ed, any last thoughts on Tom's comments there as we wind down?
Just the importance of budget. I mean, just like when your boss says you did great and then you get no raise. Well, I mean, it's budget. It's what you say is one thing, but where you allocate your money is really the most important thing. So people watching, go take a peek at your budget for next year and make sure that this is an area that you're beginning to prioritize.
Yeah, thank you for that, those observations, Ed and Tom. This was a great session. I took a few notes. So we've kind of gone through covering the state and trends of endpoint and EDR. We talked about gaps in mobile. We talked about zero trust and the zero trust centricity for a lot of organizations. Talked about endpoint becoming the app more than the device. The inflection of AI and the AI agent on the client is a whole new kind of risk curve. And oh yeah, we need the compliance guys to catch up and the audit guys to catch up and the budgets to catch up. So I think we've kind of done a very well-rounded exploration of the topic for our business technology and cyber leaders here today. I think we'd like to leave you with one thought is it sounds like both of you are saying every one of you joining us today should go back and look at what mobile means in your enterprise. What does it mean for your customers in your business? And what does it mean for your employees in your business? And make sure you're treating it as a first-class citizen. Budget, people, compliance, audit, investment, integrations, all of those things. So we'd like to thank Ed and Tom for joining us today. We'd like to thank all of you in the audience for joining us today as well. As I said earlier, we did record this session, so within a few days, you'll get an email with a copy of the recording and some additional information on Appdome. We appreciate your time today and look forward to you at our next online event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.